Ellen Harper sat across from Lydia Bennett in the small, sterile conference room at Apex Solutions, a place she'd spent 15 years of her life turning into something remarkable. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and printer ink, the kind of corporate scent that clings to your clothes long after you leave. Lydia, with her sharp blazer and sharper smile, leaned forward slightly, her voice carrying a note of satisfaction she didn't bother to hide. After 15 years with Apex Solutions, we're restructuring your position, Ellen, she said, her eyes flicking to Nancy Coleman from HR, who sat beside her like a silent sentinel. The company's moving in a new direction. Nancy slid a manila folder across the table, her expression a carefully rehearsed mask of regret. Your contributions have been valuable, she added, her tone flat, but we're consolidating the research division under the product development team. Inside that folder, Ellen knew, was the standard severance package. 2 weeks' pay for every year of service, health coverage for 3 months, and a list of career counseling numbers she'd never call. She didn't open it. She just nodded, her hands steady as she took the folder and tucked it under her arm. I completely understand, Ellen said, her voice calm, almost too calm. At 55, she'd seen enough corporate shakeups to know how this went. But Lydia and Nancy didn't expect that. They'd braced for tears, maybe a raised voice, some kind of protest from a woman who'd given her prime years to a tech industry that worshipped youth over experience. Instead, Ellen's composure threw them off. Relief flickered across their faces, brief, unguarded. They thought they'd gotten off easy. We'd like you to clean out your desk by Friday, Lydia continued, gaining confidence from Ellen's apparent acceptance. We'll need your key card, company laptop, and phone before you leave. Your team will be notified this afternoon. Ellen's team 6 brilliant engineers she'd handpicked and mentored over the years. The same team that had helped her build the distributed processing algorithm now powering Apex Solutions' flagship product, Pinnacle Accounting, used by over 40% of Fortune 500 companies. Of course, Ellen replied, rising from her chair. Is there anything else? Lydia and Nancy exchanged a quick glance, clearly surprised by how smoothly this was going. That's all for now, Lydia said, recovering fast. Thank you for keeping this professional. Ellen gave a small nod and walked out, her heels clicking softly against the linoleum floor. As she passed the glass-walled executive conference room, she caught a glimpse of Howard Grayson, Apex's CEO, gesturing wildly at a PowerPoint slide titled Q3 Revenue Projections. Howard, the same man who'd taken credit for her algorithm at last year's tech conference, calling her one of our research folks, while the crowd applauded his vision. She didn't linger. She closed her office door behind her and pulled out her personal phone. Her fingers moved quickly, typing a single message. It's happening. Friday's my last day. The reply came back in seconds. Perfect timing. Contracts are ready. Dinner tonight to finalize. Ellen smiled a real smile, not the polite one she'd worn for Lydia and Nancy. She glanced at her desk calendar. Today was Wednesday, March 19th, 2025. Friday, she'd walk out of Apex Solutions for the last time. And Monday? Monday would be something else entirely. But this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. Ellen had known this was coming for weeks. It started with a misdirected email thread she'd stumbled across in her inbox last month, an accident, or maybe fate. Buried in the chain was a memo from Howard to the legal team. Consolidate research under product dev Harper's position redundant. Move fast. Below that, a note about her algorithm. Company developed tech, no specific inventor attribution needed. They'd planned to bury her name, claim her life's work as their own, and push her out before securing the patent. Except they'd made one critical mistake: they never filed it. Ellen had built that algorithm from scratch, late nights and weekends blending into years, her personal laptop humming beside her as she tweaked code Apex would later turn into millions. She'd asked about the patent 3 months ago, casual as you please, and the legal team had brushed her off with promises to handle it soon. Something about their tone didn't sit right. So she dug deeper, combing through internal docs on her own time. That's when she found the strategy memo. Apex intended to sidestep her entirely, banking on the fine print of her employment contract that claimed intellectual property developed on company time. They didn't know she'd seen it coming. They didn't know she'd already started planning. Back in her office, Ellen packed a few things, a photo of her late husband, a coffee mug her team gave her last Christmas with Boss Lady scrawled across it in red cursive. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. As she wrapped a small industry award she'd won 2 years ago for the very algorithm Howard now paraded as his own, she thought about the email that had tipped her off. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a gift. She'd spent 15 years at Apex Solutions, pouring her soul into a company that saw her as disposable. Now, at 55, when most people might fade into retirement, Ellen Harper was ready to turn the tables. She'd always been the quiet one, the steady hand guiding her team through deadlines and egos, the woman who let others take the spotlight while she worked in the shadows. Not anymore. That email had lit a fire she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't just walking away, she was walking towards something bigger, something they'd never see coming. As she slipped her phone in her purse, she pictured Howard up there in his glass tower, oblivious to the storm brewing 8 floors below. Friday would mark the end of her time at Apex Solutions. But it was only the beginning of what came next. Ellen paused at her office door, taking one last look at the space she'd called hers for over a decade. The awards on the shelf, the sticky notes from her team pinned to the corkboard, the view of the parking lot through the narrow window. She didn't feel sadness or anger, just certainty. She'd given Apex everything, and they'd thrown it back at her face. But she wasn't leaving empty-handed. Not by a long shot. She stepped into the hallway, the door clicking shut behind her, and headed for the elevator. Who was on the other end of that text? What did they have waiting for her? The answers were coming, and they'd change everything. Ellen Harper stepped out of the elevator and into the open plan office she'd called home for 15 years. The hum of keyboards and murmured conversations filled the air, but today it felt different, like the sound was muffled, like everyone was holding their breath. She walked past cubicles where junior developers glanced up with pity in their eyes, their heads tilting in that awkward way people do when they don't know what to say. Word traveled fast at Apex Solutions. By now, the admin assistants probably had a betting pool on whether she'd cry or storm out. Ellen didn't give them the satisfaction. She kept her chin up, her pace steady, and headed straight for her office. Inside, she closed the door and leaned against it for a moment, letting the silence settle. The first challenge wasn't the severance folder still tucked under her arm, or the task of packing up 15 years in 2 days. It was staying calm, playing the part they expected while the gears in her mind turned faster than ever. She set the folder on her desk and started sorting through drawers, pulling out personal files, a stack of old conference badges, a half-dead plant she'd never bothered to replace. Every so often, someone knocked a hesitant tap from a colleague offering a sympathetic "if you need anything." Ellen smiled, thanked them, and sent them on their way. She wasn't here to make a scene. Not yet. By Thursday morning, the office buzzed with a different energy. Ellen overheard whispers in the break room, rumors about restructuring and budget cuts. One of the younger engineers, a kid named Jake who'd barely been there a year, cornered her by the coffee machine. "Is it true they're letting you go?" he asked, his voice low, like he was breaking some unspoken rule. Ellen stirred cream in her mug and nodded. "Friday's my last day," she said simply. Jake's eyes widened. "But you built Pinnacle Accounting. I mean, your algorithm's the whole reason I applied here." She gave him a small smile. "Things change, Jake. Companies make choices." He shook his head, muttering something about it being unfair, but Ellen didn't linger. She had bigger fish to fry. That afternoon, as she boxed up more of her things, she passed the executive conference room again. Through the glass, she saw Howard Grayson holding court, his broad shoulders squared as he pointed at a chart labeled Pinnacle Expansion. The man had a knack for filling a room, his voice booming even through the soundproof walls. Ellen slowed her steps just enough to catch a glimpse of the slide revenue projections tied to her algorithm, the one he'd claimed as his brainchild at last year's Tech Summit in Chicago. She remembered that day vividly. Howard up on stage, flashing his $1 million smile, while she sat in the back row, clapping politely with the rest of the research folks. He never even said her name. The injustice of it hit her like a punch to the gut, not because it was new, but because it had been building for years. 15 years of late nights, of debugging code while her peers went home to their families, of handing Howard and his cronies the tools to look like geniuses. And now, at 55, they were tossing her out like yesterday's news, betting she'd fade quietly into the background. Ellen clenched her jaw and kept walking. They didn't know she'd already found a crack in their armor. That misdirected email from last month wasn't just a slip-up, it was a map to their downfall. Thursday night, she drove across town to Meridian, an upscale restaurant with dim lighting and a wine list longer than most novels. Tom Reynolds, CEO of Summit Technologies, Apex's biggest rival, had reserved a private alcove in the back, hidden behind Japanese screens that muffled the clink of glasses and chatter from the main dining room. Ellen slid into the booth across from him, her gray coat still damp from the March drizzle outside. Tom, a wiry man pushing 60 with a handshake like iron, grinned as she settled in. "They actually did it," he said, shaking his head. "I figure Howard might pull something, but cutting the woman who built their golden goose? That's next level stupid." Ellen sipped her water, letting the coolness steady her. "Howard never understood what I created," she said. "He saw the shiny interface, the sales numbers, the buzz. The architecture underneath? Just tech stuffed at him." Tom chuckled, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. 3 months ago, she'd reached out to him after finding that strategy memo in Apex's internal docs. She'd told him about the patent oversight, how Apex's legal team had dropped the ball, leaving her original algorithm unclaimed. And she'd told him about the upgrades she'd been working on late nights on her personal laptop, boosting efficiency by 43%. Work she'd done off the clock, on her own dime, outside Apex's reach. "I checked the patent office this afternoon," she said, keeping her voice low. "Mine went through last week. Fully granted, all mine." Tom's grin widened. "You're a force of nature, Ellen. Howard's got no idea what's about to hit him." She pulled a thumb drive from her purse and slid it across the table. "Development logs, timestamps, everything. It's airtight." Tom pocketed it without looking, his trust in her absolute. They ordered steak for him, salmon for her, and spent the next hour hashing out details. Summit Technologies wanted her algorithm, her team, her vision, and they were ready to pay for it. As the waiter cleared their plates, Tom leaned in. "You sure about this? Once we move, there's no going back. Apex will come at you hard." Ellen met his gaze, unflinching. "They've been coming at me for years, Tom. Taking my work, my credit, my time. This isn't revenge, it's justice." He nodded, satisfied. "Dinner's on me, then. To new beginnings." They clinked glasses water for her, bourbon for him, and Ellen felt a weight lift. She'd spent 15 years bending to Apex's will, but now she was bending the game to hers. Friday came fast. Ellen walked into Apex Solutions for the last time, her cardboard box under one arm, her key card dangling from her fingers. The office felt like a ghost town. Her team was out on a training session Lydia had scheduled to keep them from saying goodbye. Clever, but it wouldn't matter. Ellen had already texted Carlos Rivera, her lead engineer, from her personal phone. "Check your email tonight." Big news. She finished packing, handed over her company gear to Nancy in HR, and signed the exit paperwork with a steady hand. Nancy droned through the checklist. "You understand any intellectual property developed during your employment days with Apex?" Ellen smiled faintly. "Anything developed on their time, with their resources, sure." Nancy didn't catch the nuance. She never did. As Ellen walked out the glass doors of Apex Solutions, the late afternoon sun hit her face, warm despite the chill. She didn't look back, not at the building, not at Howard's office glowing on the top floor, not at the life she was leaving behind. She climbed in her car, pulled out her phone, and reread Tom's last text. Contract signed. Press release ready. Monday's the day. Ellen started the engine, a quiet hum filling the silence. Howard would strut into work Monday morning, oblivious, thinking he'd won. What would his face look like when he realized he'd lost everything? She'd find out soon enough. Oh, And if you're still with me, have you ever been undervalued at work? Drop your story in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see how this plays out. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Ellen Harper spent her last Friday night as a free agent in her small suburban kitchen, the kind with outdated oak cabinets and a linoleum floor that creaked underfoot. The clock on the wall ticked past 8, its steady rhythm a quiet companion as she sat at the table, a glass of iced tea sweating beside her. Her laptop was open, glowing softly in the dim light, displaying the final email from Tom Reynolds, contracts locked. Press release queued for Monday, 7 a.m. sharp. Welcome aboard, Chief Innovation Officer. Ellen read it again, letting the words sink in. Chief Innovation Officer at Summit Technologies. A 7-figure signing bonus, equity in a company on the rise, and royalties from every product using her algorithm. It wasn't just a job, it was a lifeline. She leaned back in her chair, the weight of the past 15 years pressing against her chest. For so long, she'd been the invisible cog at Apex Solutions, the one who kept the machine running while Howard Grayson and his suits took the bows. At 55, she'd started to wonder if that was it, if the world would just keep spinning past her, leaving her name buried in some footnote of tech history. That fear had gnawed at her for years, sharper with every conference where she sat in the back, every meeting where her ideas were repackaged by younger voices. But tonight, staring at Tom's email, she felt something shift. This wasn't just about proving Howard wrong, it was about proving herself right. The deal with Summit Technologies had come together faster than she dared hope. After their dinner at Meridian, Tom had moved like lightning, pulling in his best IP attorney to fast-track her patent. Ellen had handed over everything. Development logs from her personal laptop, timestamped showing late-night coding session 2 a.m., 3 a.m., long after Apex's servers went quiet-proof, that her 43% efficiency upgrade was hers alone. The patent had sailed through, granted just days ago, a legal fortress Apex couldn't touch. And now, Summit owned the exclusive rights. Tom's offer wasn't just generous, it was a declaration of war. "We're not just taking your tech," he'd said over dessert, his voice low and firm. "We're taking you. Howard's going to choke on this." Ellen sipped her tea, the cold biting her tongue. She thought about her team, Carlos Rivera and the 5 other engineers she'd trained from the ground up. They'd stuck by her through deadlines and disasters, their loyalty forged in late-night pizza runs and shared victories. Apex was about to cut them loose too, or worse, bury them under some hotshot product manager who'd never touched a line of code. Ellen couldn't let that happen. She opened a new email, typed 6 names into the recipient line, and started writing. "Big changes coming Monday. Check your personal inboxes tomorrow for offers you won't want to miss. Trust me." She hit send, her pulse quickening. This wasn't just her fight, Anna Marie, it was theirs too. Saturday blurred into Sunday, a quiet stretch of packing up the last of her Apex life. She shredded old memos, boxed up family photos, and dropped that half-dead plant in the trash with a small, satisfying thud. By Sunday night, she was ready. She ironed a charcoal suit, new, sharp, the kind of outfit that said she wasn't going anywhere, but UPenn laid it out for Monday. Her phone buzzed with replies from her team. Carlos first. "What's cooking, boss?" Then Anita. "You've got my attention." Ellen smiled. They'd see soon enough. Monday morning broke bright and clear, the first day of spring in 2025 feeling like a clean slate. Ellen stood in her new office at Summit Technologies, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The desk was sleek mahogany, the chair leather, the air crisp with possibility. She'd arrived at 7:30, chauffeured in a company town car, her name already on the door, Ellen Harper, Chief Innovation Officer. Tom met her there, his grin as wide as the skyline. "Press release went live at 7, he said, handing her a tablet. "Industry's already buzzing. You're trending on 3 tech forums." She scrolled through the announcement. Summit Technologies acquires exclusive rights to revolutionary processing algorithm. Welcomes creator Ellen Harper as Chief Innovation Officer. It laid out her credentials: 15 years at Apex, sole inventor of the patented tech, then dropped the bombshell. Any company using her algorithm, including Apex's Pinnacle accounting, would need to negotiate licensing with Summit moving forward. Ellen's breath caught. This was the big reveal, the moment Howard's world would start to crack. She pictured him strolling into Apex right about now, coffee in hand, ready for his Monday strut. He had no idea what was waiting. Tom clapped her on the shoulder. Legal's prepped for pushback. Your documentation's bulletproof personal equipment. Off-hours work, all time-stamped. They can squirm, but they can't fight this. Ellen nodded, her mind racing. She'd spent years swallowing Apex's slights, letting Howard's ego eclipse her work. But that email last month had flipped a switch. She wasn't just walking away, she was taking control. And her team? She'd fight for them too. I sent offers to my engineers, she told Tom. 6 senior roles, big raises. They're in if they want it. He raised an eyebrow, impressed. You're building an army already. Good. We'll need them. Ellen glanced out the window, the city sprawling below like a chessboard. She'd been a pawn at Apex, moved around by Howard's whims. Now she was a queen, and the board was hers to play. Her phone buzzed Carlos again. Chaos at Apex. What did you do? She typed back. Check your email. You're all invited to the party. A laugh escaped her, sharp and free. She'd faced her fear of fading away and turned it into fuel. This was her step into the light. But the real question lingered as she settled into her new chair, the leather creaking under her weight. Her team had been her backbone at Apex, Carlos with his quick fixes, Anita with her relentless testing, the others with their quiet brilliance. Would they follow her to Summit, or would Apex's chaos swallow them first? She'd know by the end of the day. For now, she turned to the tablet, watching the industry chatter explode. Monday was just getting started, and Ellen was only warming up. Ellen stood at her new office window at Summit Technologies, watching the Monday morning traffic crawl 8 stories below. The clock on her desk read 9:15, and her phone buzzed with a text from Carlos Rivera. Complete chaos here. What did you do? She smiled, typing back. Check your personal email. Offers are waiting. Across town, Apex Solutions was unraveling, and Ellen could almost feel the shock waves rippling through their glass headquarters. The press release had hit at 7 a.m., a precision strike. Summit Technologies now owned her algorithm, and Apex's flagship product, Pinnacle Accounting, was suddenly a legal minefield. She'd lit the fuse now. She watched it burn. By 10, the industry was on fire. Ellen scrolled through updates on her tablet as Tom Reynolds paced her office, his energy crackling like static. Tech journals are calling it a coup, he said, pointing at the screen. 3 already want interviews. Apex's stock's down 7% since the market opened hours, is up 12. Ellen nodded, her eyes on a headline. Summit snags algorithm creator, leaves Apex scrambling. Scrambling didn't cover it. Carlos texted again. Howard's losing it. Legal's pulling every file with your name on it. She could picture the scene, Howard pacing that glass-walled conference room, barking at Lydia Bennett and the legal team, demanding answers no one had. The twist hit Apex like a freight train. They'd lost control of the algorithm that powered 40% of their revenue. Pinnacle Accounting relied on Ellen's code to crunch massive data sets faster than anything else on the market. Without licensing rights, they'd either have to pay Summit through the nose or rebuild from scratch a process that could take years and millions. Howard had strutted into work that morning thinking he'd won by cutting Ellen loose. Now he was staring down a crisis he'd never seen coming. Ellen's phone lit up with an email from him at 10:45, the subject line a single word, urgent. The message was short, dripping with panic. Ellen, there's a misunderstanding. Call me ASAP to discuss. She forwarded it to Summit's legal team without replying. Limbs sweat. Back at Apex, the fallout spread fast. Carlos sent a play-by-play. Boards on emergency call. They're wheeling in research servers for analysis. Ellen's meticulous exit, those detailed transition notes she'd left behind were, now, a double-edged sword. They proved she'd acted in good faith, handing over every password and process Apex could claim. But they also showed how much they'd relied on her. Without her algorithm, those notes were just a roadmap to a dead end. By noon, Miguel's updates painted a grim picture. Stock's down 10% now. Howard's blaming legal for the patent flop. Lydia looks like she's about to bolt. Ellen's quiet revenge was louder than she'd imagined. The crisis peaked when Apex's general counsel called Summit's legal team at 1 p.m., voice tight with desperation. "We're reviewing Ellen Harper's contract. This tech was developed on company time, belongs to us." Summit's lawyer didn't flinch. "Check her logs," he shot back. "Personal equipment, off-hours work, all time-stamped. You've got nothing." Ellen had built her case like a fortress every late-night session on her own laptop, every line of code written outside Apex's network, documented down to the minute. Apex could threaten to sue, but they'd crash against her evidence. Tom grinned when he got the update. "They're grasping at straws. We got them cornered." But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Ellen's moment of darkness came that afternoon as she sat in her new chair, the weight of her choices settling in. Apex wouldn't go down without a fight. Howard's ego wouldn't let him. A lawsuit, even a weak one, could drag on, draining time and energy. And her team? Carlos and the others hadn't replied to her offers yet. What if they stayed loyal to Apex, caught in the chaos she'd unleashed? She'd pulled the pin on this grenade now. She had to live with the blast. Her hand hovered over her phone, tempted to call Carlos, but she stopped herself. They'd come or they wouldn't. She'd done her part. Then the tide turned. At 2:30, Carlos texted, "Offers are insane. Team's in 6 for 6. When do we start?" Relief flooded Ellen like a warm wave. She typed back, "Next Monday. Welcome to Summit." She forwarded the news to Tom, who clapped his hands together. "That's your army, Ellen." Apex just lost their best shot at rebuilding. With her team secured, Ellen's plan snapped into focus. She wasn't just hitting Apex where it hurt, she was stripping them bare. Summit would roll out her upgraded algorithm in their next product line, leaving Pinnacle accounting in the dust. Apex's only move was to negotiate, and Ellen would set the terms. By late afternoon, the crisis at Apex reached fever pitch. Carlos sent a final update, all hands meeting at 3. "Howard spinning some will fight this line, but no one's buying it." Ellen leaned back, picturing Howard's red face, Lydia's nervous fidgeting, the staff's growing unease. She'd turned their betrayal into her triumph, but the game wasn't over. Apex still had a board, a legal team, a shred of pride. They'd scramble for a counterattack, some desperate bid to claw back control. Ellen glanced at Tom, who was already on the phone with Summit's PR team, plotting their next press move. "We got the upper hand," he said, hanging up. "Your call on how hard we push." Ellen nodded, her mind racing. She'd prepared for this, every log, every timestamp, every chess move calculated over weeks. Apex thought they'd discarded her, but she'd been building a new empire while they slept. Now, they were awake, and the panic was setting in. Howard would thrash and flail, but could he pull Apex out of this nosedive? Or would he drag them all down with him? Ellen turned back to the window, the city lights flickering on as dusk fell. She'd find out soon, and she'd be ready. Ellen Harper stood at the head of the conference table at Summit Technologies on Tuesday morning, March 25th, 2025. The room buzzed with energy as Carlos Rivera and her 5 other engineers, her old Apex crew, settled into their seats, their faces lit with a mix of excitement and disbelief. Just 10 days ago, she'd walked out of Apex Solutions with a cardboard box and a severance folder. Now she was leading her team into a new era, her algorithm the cornerstone of Summit's future. Across town, Apex was crumbling, and Ellen was the architect of its fall. The confrontation came fast. By Monday afternoon, Apex's legal team had caved, reaching out to Summit with a shaky offer to negotiate licensing. Howard Grayson's all-hands meeting had flopped. Carlos texted Ellen a blow-by-blow. He promised a fight, but the room was dead. People are jumping ship. By Tuesday, the board had seen enough. At 9 a.m., an industry alert hit Ellen's inbox. Apex Solutions CEO Howard Grayson steps down, effective immediately. Lydia Bennett and the head of legal followed him out the door, casualties of a crisis they'd built with their own hands. Ellen didn't blink. She'd known Howard's ego would be his undinged, rather burn Apex down than admit he'd lost. The climax hit that afternoon when Apex's interim CEO, Richard Donovan, emailed her directly. Unlike Howard's desperate plea, this was measured, respectful. Ellen, I'm here to clean up the mess. We'd like to discuss licensing fair terms, public acknowledgement of your work. Can we meet next week? Ellen forwarded it to Tom Reynolds with a note. They're ready to bend. Tom called her minutes later, laughing. They've got no choice. Pinnacle's dead without your tech, and they can't rebuild fast enough. Ellen agreed to the meeting, but on her terms. Summit's lawyers would draft a deal steep rates, a press statement naming her as the algorithm's creator, no wiggle room. She wasn't going back not for any price. A micro twist sealed it. Wednesday morning, Ellen got a call from Nancy Coleman, the HR drone who'd handed her the severance papers. Ellen, Nancy started, her voice tight. Howard thought you might consider consulting for us, help smooth this over. We can make it worth your while. Ellen almost laughed. Tell Richard I'm happy where I am, she said, her tone cool. Summit's my home now. Licensing talks go through them. She hung up, shaking her head. Even in defeat, Apex couldn't let go of the idea that she'd save them. That ship had sailed the moment they'd pushed her out. By Friday, the dust settled. Summit stock had climbed another 8%, while Apex's had tanked 23% since Mondial bloodbath investors wouldn't forgive. Ellen led her first innovation team meeting that morning, mapping out upgrades to her algorithm that would bury Pinnacle accounting for good. Carlos grinned across the table. This is what Apex should have been: real work, real respect. Anita nodded. No more explaining basics to suits who don't listen. Ellen felt it to a quiet pride, a sense of belonging she'd lost at Apex. At 56, she wasn't just surviving the tech world, she was rewriting it. The resolution came full circle a week later when Apex signed the licensing deal. The press release was blunt. Apex Solutions secures licensing for Ellen Harper's distributed processing algorithm, acknowledges her as sole creator. Ellen read it over coffee in her Summit office, the morning sun streaming through the windows. Summit had surpassed Apex in market valuation that same day, a milestone Tom celebrated with champagne and a toast to valuing innovation and innovators. Ellen clinked her glass against his, the sound sharp and clear. She turned 15 years of being undervalued into a victory that echoed across the industry. The aftermath lingered like a good story's final note. Tech journals ran pieces titled The Algorithm Crisis, How Apex Lost Its Edge, and Ellen Harper's Quiet Revolution. At the National Tech Innovation Conference 3 months later, Ellen delivered the keynote, her voice steady as she told a packed room. Innovation isn't anonymous. It's people, real people who deserve real credit. The applause was thunderous, a far cry from the back row clapping she'd endured at Apex. Young engineers approached her afterward, one saying, "Your story's why I keep logs, now me works mine." Ellen smiled. Smart move. Protect what you build. 1 year to the day after her dismissal, Ellen sat in her spacious Summit office, reviewing a quarterly report. Under her leadership, they'd launched 3 products that dominated the market, each built on her algorithm. Apex was still limping along, a shadow of its former self. Its new policies on inventor recognition, a faint echo of Summit's. Ellen leaned back, her gaze drifting to the city skyline. She'd won not just revenge, but recognition. Her name was etched into the industry now, right where it belonged. But a question lingered, soft and open-ended. Who'd be the next to shake things up? Someone out there was watching, waiting, ready to claim their own value. She hoped they'd take the shot. And that's the story, folks. Thanks for sticking with me through Ellen's journey. It means the world. If it hit home for you, drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and tell me in the comments. Have you ever had a fight for what's yours? I'd love to hear it. Check out our next video for more stories like this. Real people, real stakes. See you there, and take care.